Okay. Okay, so today we're going to talk about metacognition and walk through maybe some of the activities or questions that we could use to guide this discussion. And I was thinking about it last night, reflecting, as we're supposed to. I'm probably the perfect person to do this topic. So I teach education, and when anybody ever asks me what I do, I say I teach, or, I'm an education professor, and they look at me with this misunderstanding. And I say I teach teachers how to teach. And so I thought we were thinking about thinking. So I will teach us how to think about thinking, I guess. Okay, I wanted to show or share kind of the pedigree of where this resource came from. And then maybe at the end, hear your thoughts on the videos. Did anybody watch all 5? Were you able to? Okay. You did 6.
Playlist has a 6.
Oh, it does? I didn't get that.
It's both before and after.
Really? Is he wearing a different shirt?
He is. It's a 3 years post-haste sort of recap, and he actually invites you to watch it before and after the other 5.
Nice.
I missed that one.
It's only if you go on the link to the playlist rather than the individual videos.
I did the playlist and I didn't see those.
It's at the very top. If you click on it, you have to go back and click to it.
Okay.
If there is a video on YouTube that I can watch, I will watch.
So a couple of summers ago, the book that the dean put out was Cheating Lessons. So if you read it, James Lang, in one of his chapters, references this video series and really kind of gives credit to Dr. Chu as kind of the leading voice on metacognition at the college level. So within elementary and middle and high school, there's resources of how to teach your students to be metacognitive, but to really aim at college students. So that was where the idea for the videos came from. So I thought we would just talk about what metacognition is, why it's important, and then maybe some ideas, reflective, personally sharing what strategies that work for us, things that we can build upon. Maybe I'm going to show the video first. This is listed in the supplemental texts as an option for Eddie, was this your resource? The Mind Palace?
No.
Is it usually? Oh, nice. Okay.
Let there be dark. Oh, what does that mean? There not be dark.
Or it's not.
Just read it on the computer.
I see. Thank you so much.
Very much talking from what I may as well go. Must be something. Something very deep. Get up. What? Get up, I need to go to my mind palace.
Matteo
Actually, he's not looking very much. Talking from what I may as well go. What? Oh, it's mind palace. So memory technique, sort of mental map. You plot a map of the location. It doesn't have to be a real place, and then you deposit memories there. But, you can never forget anything. All you have to do is find your way back to it.
So this imaginary location created in a house or a street.
Yeah.
It's a palace. It is a palace.
Yeah, it would be.
Are we done? Okay, so I think that would be a fun connection. The visual really helps. So, okay, metacognition, meaning the process of thinking about one's own thinking, understanding yourself and what works for you cognitively, but also what doesn't work, and really seeking to engage in that reflective process. One of the other definitions I came across was metacognition is the knowledge of our knowledge. Ooh, okay. So overall, it's meant to just be this regulatory process by which a person understands and controls our own cognitive processes. Would anybody else define it differently or explain it differently, make sense of it in another way?
Once upon a time, there were some people called Pythagoreans. Before they ever got out of bed in the morning, they made it a point of asking themselves, what was the first thing I said or did yesterday? And what was second? And what was third? And so on. And if there was time, they would then start on the day before.
Thank you.
They called it anamnesis.
Did you ever get nothing?
Yeah, I mean, it's just gonna sound like what you said, but I think it's different. You said our knowledge about knowledge, but I think it's like thinking about thinking. I've always thought of it as thinking about thinking, but maybe that's because because I teach math, I teach people more how to problem solve than I do how to catalog things.
Sure. Yeah, and thinking is more active, probably, than just our knowledge being a noun. Yeah. So I made a copy just of the description of the Benedictine value that we're aiming for this week, as well as the description in the proposed catalog about what metacognition is and what we mean by it. So something really stands out to me within the definition, the value of conversion of life, and as it's described, the second sentence, to pursue continual self-improvement, seeking the truth each day, joyfully beginning again and again, hoping in God. So those three facets really, to me, kind of bookend and kind of create this cycle of we are all, as imperfect humans, we are all on in this journey and should be seeking self-improvement, seeking the truth each day, which the first week of this class we talked about is Jesus Christ, is God himself. And the fact that we can joyfully begin again and again kind of pointed to me the fact that we are human and we will fall short, and thus there is need to continue this effort. Okay, so what the research talks to us about, why metacognition is important, or how it specifically supports students. When students have a good gauge of their own cognitive self, they are more likely to put in effort that is aligned to the process, effort that's aligned to the task. So they don't waste time studying in a way that's not aligned to the content. So it's much more efficient. So poor metacognition, and I think the video did a good job of talking about this. I like the phrase, he talks about students being overconfident in their abilities, overconfident in, they overestimate themselves and they underestimate the rigor that a task takes, whatever that task is. And I think we all see that, we all know that. So the research also aligns metacognition to self-efficacy. And so when a student really gets into this process of understanding how does my brain work, what does it take for me to study effectively, then that gives them a sense of self-control over the outcome. So they begin to see the impact of what that looks like. And so it becomes purposeful. So that can also give them self-confidence. So one way that I was thinking about presenting this, so to me metacognition is kind of this cycle of improvement, mentally speaking or internally. So all of this has to happen within us. So what I think most, even 18-year-olds are familiar with is goal setting and having a goal or something that they want to improve upon, kind of in the physical sense, whether that's their relationships or they set goals for themselves athletically or I don't know, in their relationships or in their faith life. And so one thing I thought about kind of paralleling for them was that metacognition is really setting goals and engaging in this process of evaluation on how am I doing toward those goals. So what do I hope to accomplish? What am I trying? How has that helped? And then kind of perpetuating that cycle. So a question that I thought I would use to start out this discussion was, so when in your life have you improved on something? And how did that process get kick-started when you decided that you wanted to get better at something?
When I noticed something went wrong.
What was the outcome? Or it went wrong, and what was the consequence of the wrong?
It depends on the circumstances.
Sure.
Some of the people I've seen in classes look over their game videos and
Oh, sure.
see what went wrong or what went right.
Yeah.
But when I try to quiz myself about do I remember something, it's not the same thing to remember something which can be persisting as it is to notice a rupture in one's memory. It seems to me that metacognition is closer to what we called recollection than it is to memory. It's got to break, and then I try to reestablish what's broken.
Yeah, and I think the video also talks about that retrieval process. So mentally forgetting things and having to retrieve them or relearn them.
I mean, that's what people need to be educated in, not memory.
Yeah, you were talking about math, right? You don't teach memorization, but you teach understanding. And
No, I actually today in class, I made the comment when I put 2 formulas on the board, I said, today I'm actually going to make you memorize something. I think it's the first time in the semester that I have, but yeah, I really discourage it.
Josh?
I mean, yeah, I tell my students all the time, history, you guys think it's memorization, because that's how it was presented to you in high school, but it's so much more than that. But memorization does play a key in learning. I mean, I guess I really enjoyed his videos, but the one, I think you have to have that shallow knowledge before you can get that deeper understanding, which I guess was my disconnect with it. But I'm straying away from the original question completely right now, so. I mean, with the terms he's throwing up, memorize these terms that have an E, or memorize a pleasant term. Sure, but if you don't even know what the terms mean, how can you decide if it's pleasant or unpleasant? So I do think that you do need that shallow learning before that deeper understanding can take place. I mean, how can I ask my students to evaluate the ideological currents of the revolution if they don't even understand who John Locke is or what radical Whig ideology is?
What's a revolution?
Or what a revolution is.
But doesn't it make a difference where we are on the Bloom's taxonomy? So if all we're doing is testing knowledge, can you spell something correctly? That's at that level. I mean, applying it, a little bit more skills. You're doing analysis, and then, evaluation, and then, synthesis. We all want our students to have synthesis, but you can't start there. And they think they can do synthesis, I'm talking about overestimating, without, I always tell my students, it's hard to write a research paper without doing research. And it's abundantly clear when you read a paper when Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback of all time, and he's the greatest, and he's really good, and he wins lots of Super Bowls. What could you tell me that, there's no endnotes, there's no documentation? Where is the research to help, support that unsubstantiated opinion? So I think it's important to know where we are in the taxonomy of what skill we're trying to help them achieve.
I think it's important, and I think I had a privileged circumstance in this because when I was in seminary, we had a spiritual director, obviously, and you kind of have a plan for your spiritual life. But we also had an academic advisor, and I served in that role later for others, where you take the courses that you have and you set your own goals for those courses. Because right now I hand them a syllabus. They might see that's my roadmap for the class. And, I could be driving a bus and everybody's just kind of sitting there and we're just kind of going along with it, right? But I try to tell the students, you're not legally required to be here.
You chose this class. Well, it's a required class. You chose this college. Right? So indirectly or directly, this has been your choice. So I'm not going to tolerate, you going back on that choice. You can go back on that choice if you want to. Now, as of now, with a W, because we've already got beyond that date. But so that the active side goes on the student. What are you trying to achieve in this class? And sometimes those things are these habits of mind. There are some classes that are going to help me reflect. There are going to be certain other classes that help me broaden a knowledge base. There are going to be certain other classes. That's why I always say give a week or two in a class till you know more or less, from the teacher or from the subject matter what's that going. But you have to be the one who's actively involved here. Because if you're just a passenger or a spectator, then you're not even a student. A student is one who's eager, right? And I think a lot of this boils down to constantly asking yourself the question, where am I? Because to reflect, right, when we reflect, so before you reflect, you have to deflect. The first thing you do, you have to know something. And you ask, what do I know? How do I know that? And you take a third person point of view, right? Like no doctor can doctor himself as a doctor. He has to doctor himself as a patient, right? And he has to think, if I had a patient coming to me with these symptoms, what would I say as a doctor, even though on the inside, he's experiencing them on the inside. And I think, a lot of times students, unfortunately, quantifiable things like grades can cloud the issue, right? Oh, what did I get on this? Whatever. What did you learn? What did you know? That has to be more important to you than what the grade is. And if it's not, you're not really a student. You're just somebody jumping up and down for Scooby snacks.
And kind of to that point, so at the end, maybe where we can share some ideas of how to help our students start training themselves in this way, in a metacognitive practice. I think even that, so as we discussed with them in our BC Experience class, this shift, and we had talked at one point, this shift from high school to college, and the idea, the goal of ownership, and you owning your education. And there's this dichotomy that we talk about in education about owning information versus borrowing, owning knowledge versus borrowing knowledge. And so you walk in, and yes, you do have to meet the goals of your professor's syllabus, but what are your goals? And so I think as we model to them that, hey, this is a different arena, this is your opportunity to get out of your classes, your professors, your encounters, whatever goals you set.
And I loved in the video saying that strategies that worked in high school might not work in college. We were talking about that earlier, Julia.
Right.
Building off of that and what Eddie said and what Josh said, and thinking about a class. So I teach art history, art history 1, 36,000 years of human creativity, one semester. And really the date keeps moving back because we keep finding older things that people made and verifying it. So we deal with, and art history has traditionally been a memorization heavy discipline. I'm not an art historian, but I'm very associated with it, more so than most artists, and interested in it. And we don't have an art history major, so I'm always teaching people who are not in it for the discipline. They're in it for how it might benefit them, or that they're required to take it as an art major, an architecture major, or whatever. And we have to have the facts, right? And I test them on the facts, and they think it's all about just memorizing the dates. And so, it's troubling for them. And this gets back to this ownership thing, and I love this ownership, not borrowing, because it's exactly what I try to tell them. I've never had that language before. That, they, and this is, I think, a difference between all of us here and the students we have coming in, is that they know even more than we do that the facts are out there, and they can get the facts right away. They don't have to memorize anything because it's there at their fingertips. And we know that, but we also understand the benefit of knowing things, right? And so what I try to explain to them is the reason that I have them memorize things is that not because I think memorizing things is important. But because if they don't have those things to lump onto these intellectual, bigger picture ideas, then that stuff is just this isolated thing, which he talks about in the video, right? If you just have this isolated nugget and it's not connected to anything, it doesn't do you any good. And so that's what I've always tried to get them to understand, is it's not about you knowing exactly when Michelangelo carved the David. That's not by itself useful, but it is helpful for understanding this much larger story of humankind and being a scholar, right? So that's where I get it at, and I love that ownership, not borrowing, because it really gets to, they have to find their own way to connect to that information and find their own way to build that web, whether or not they're there because it's required.
St. Ignatius of Loyola made a couple of suggestions. I think he said twice a day we should engage in what he called an examen. So maybe around noontime. And how has my day gone so far? What have I done? What have I not done? What should I have done that I've missed? If I've run across a particular fault, why don't I write it down in big letters? And then later on in the day, let me re-examine. Am I entitled to write my fault down in smaller letters?
Yeah. Learning from it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. In our discipline, so like there's a distinction, so in second language acquisition theory, there's a distinction between learning and acquisition. And learning is the memorization, and and the acquisition is when you're able to apply the language, sort of second nature, converse with it. And they just, don't get it. Like, they think it's pointless to sit down. Like when you learn the vocabulary at the beginning of the chapter, they're baffled that they're lost on day 3 when we're, they're not acquiring anything in the classroom because they haven't taken, and they haven't taken that hour or whatever to sit down and memorize. And that's the learning, and the point of that is that if you don't do that, you can't do all of this, But
see, one of the problems, I think, is that we fail to distinguish between the information and the intention. It's one thing just to be exposed to the information,
Right.
and it's another thing to be able to target the use of that information.
My college biology professor would always say, you have to make this part of who you are. The knowledge that you're learning, it has to become a part of you in order for you to understand the context of it.
You have to say, like, I am a botanist.
Right, yeah.
there's an example.
No, I like that.
And the thing of it is that as a student, I remember thinking, I can't even make it a part of who I could be on this test, right? But as you proceed or you go through your education, now, it's true. It does become a part of who you are.
So I was kind of paralleling, metacognition and setting, mental goals and academic goals and monitoring that in a reflective way. And I was kind of contrasting it to, like I said, having personal goals. And, the idea that when is a person ever going to make a change in their life? Is it because someone tells them to? Or is it because you truly come to a place internally that you're ready to set that goal or to make that change? And so I was kind of struck by that, the internal, the ownership. Nobody's gonna, I don't know, what would a goal be that a high school student has said? I want to go to state in track. But they have to say it and believe it and set that goal and put in the hard work for it. So then I thought similarly, we can talk about, study goals and study, not habits, but, metacognitive habits of this is how I approach studying. And then I think also the fact that, and we've got such various disciplines in here, that I think it's probably beneficial to be very explicit in talking about how your preparation for various classes will differ, depending on the content, depending on, is this terminology and vocabulary today, or is this a large biology application test? And so it's not that it's the time on task, or it's not an hour, but it matters what you're studying to get to that deep level that the videos talked about.
In class today, I gave an index card quiz on the chapter that we broke into last time. I asked them to name the two parts of a proposition and to give the definition that was given in the textbook. Most did not achieve that. One of the things which I suggested was something like the Lightner box system, where what are the 5 or 10 most important things in this chapter? Let me write those on the one side of a blank index card, and then on the other side, what definition does the author of the text offer? Do I understand that definition? What examples have I got? And I write those things down, and then I take that stack, put it in a box, and ask myself, looking at just the word, how much of the other side of this card can I count? If I can tell it all, I can move it up to the next level. If I can't, it goes back to level 1. And then I just keep reviewing, spaced repetition over time so that I focus on what I don't know. Part of the problem, I think, is a lot of students are under the illusion that they know something and then will proceed to try to glide through it. I'll just read the whole book, the whole chapter all over again. But that does not distinguish between what in fact they understand and what they don't.
One of the additional supplemental text I think that we put out there was a link to a learner profile. So that's another way that students can, and it's not without question, I guess. So this idea of learning learning styles, right? Or the multiple intelligence theory, it has some criticism, and but for students to, I think it's a great first step if they've never sat down and done a questionnaire that's asking, how do you prefer to learn? Is it visual? Is it auditory? When do you have the most success? So I think that can be valid. It could be a direction that we point students in as part of this conversation. So by this point, we're on the 4th week into the semester, right?
It's perfect. I love that we're going to make them watch this.
Right.
What do I do after I bomb an exam?
Well, yeah.
Right after we give them the 4-week period. Whoever chose to do that was...
Yeah.
Good job, Ginger.
So one of the questions I thought were the discussion, so they're 3.5 weeks in. What are some ways you've noticed that your study habits need to adapt, need to change from high school to now? And I would hope, to pull some fruitful lessons learned and, maybe specifically talking about, I think it's video 5, what do I do when I bomb a test? And this is where, not that the point of this is to give them these skills, but I think if it naturally comes up in conversation and you see students that need supported like that, just, encouraging them to talk to their professor and have a grown-up conversation. I actually asked, so our oldest is a junior in high school, and he had a big physics test today. And so I asked him last night before he started studying, so what do you think is the greatest predictor of success? What strategy when you're studying matters most? And he said, how much time, right? So in the first video, when one of the early videos, he lists the 5 different factors, and the point being that what matters most is what you're thinking about while studying. Yeah, Elliot was wrong. So I studied great. And it was the night before a big physics test, which is the perfect time to study for it.
I'm a little concerned that my son's also a junior and I haven't heard anything about this physics test.
When you said that, my question is, you're not studying. You know what I mean? I mean, you talk about what you're thinking about when you're studying. Well, if you're not thinking about the right things, then you're in fact not studying.
If you have a phone next to you and you keep looking at the text and responding while you're studying, reward yourself, study for 50 minutes and then take a 10-minute break and then put the phone away. I mean, but answering and looking every 2 or 3 minutes or 2 or 3 seconds is not focusing on
Which
your study.
explains why I can't get through a stack of papers in one sitting, because I need the distraction. Sometimes I lock myself in my room and say, no one come in until I finish 2.
Set goals, reward yourself. It's good. I liked the point he made about multitasking. It's not that you're good at it, it's just that you do it a lot. Right? So I think that was a nice, I mean, it's always great when it's not parents telling them. Maybe they'll hear it. So I had planned out just some other questions, just kind of marching through the differences between what is shallow learning versus deep learning. Kind of knowing yourself, what are some things that help you to get to that place of deep knowing? Is it environmental? Is it where you are? You know, I think even just talking to them about, there's places on campus you can study if your roommate is loud, or, you know, and just bringing that awareness to it.
Have they been exposed to anything like the memory palace?
As a strategy. I don't know. And you would be welcome to, you know, use it in open class with it. It's kind of similar to the box. You know, it's giving them a framework to
but it's not at all like the box, because it exists entirely within the soul. And the other thing that's involved in it is the issue of a special time on task. The reason why he needed no distractions is so that he could actually walk without disturbance mentally through his palace. And then what is supposed to happen is each of the corners and each of the walls and ceilings, there are niches that he places statuary in, and the images that he wants to associate with what he's after on each of those. This was, I think, one of the things that used to be part of the standard training for rhetoricians. But I don't think that quintillion is high on our curriculum.
I mean, but there, once again, with the same thing with memorization, right? Memorization is not bad. Bad memorization is bad, right? I mean, once again, it comes down to reflection, right? So what do you think? If you memorize something you don't understand, you're not going to understand it. Hello, right? You're going to remember it and go, I didn't understand that.
I have just a related thing to say. So a student asked me a couple days before an exam last week, do we have to memorize all these formulas? You're giving us a lot of formulas. You know, do we have to memorize all of these? I said, you can memorize them. I want you to be able to derive them. You should know the geometry so you can derive them. You're welcome to memorize them, but any of the ones you memorize, you have to understand the geometry flexibly enough to apply them in a situation that they're not written for. So, what's easier?
Yeah.
But this is, I mean, it's a special example, obviously, that you just need to memorize.
Well, we had the quote from Socrates, the unexamined life is not worth living. And then there's that other nugget of wisdom, you do you. Right? We all hear this. So, especially for them, so what works for you in Spanish might be different from biology, making that point. But then also, what works for your roommate is different. So this is internal, this is reflective, driven by, you know, your needs and your strengths, and so just also kind of making that explicit.
Are there any universal features that would be helpful? That is, I mean, even if granting that one size does not fit all, are there general principles that do fit all?
So I do have a couple of, I don't know, ways or how to answer that question of how to build metacognition. So one of the things that I came across directed at college students would be to, okay, you have studied and prepared for this exam to the best of your ability. Almost like in the video, predict what your success is going to be. Predict your score, and then hold it up against your outcome. And attempt to triangulate that and see how you gauged. Also, just the practice of seeking out feedback. So knowing that you can approach your professor and ask for, you know, whether that's feedback on performance or a specific question, but just really seeking to understand it as well can help metacognition.
What about pre-feedback? That is, before you walk into the classroom for the test, have you tested yourself?
Yeah.
I thought of that all the time. Do not let me be the first one to ask this question. Coach Wilcox has never said, hey, I got this play. We've never rehearsed it, but let's throw it out there in a really meaningful moment in the game. It doesn't happen. You're not going to do it. It's just irresponsible.
And so it's metacognition is thinking about your thinking. It's knowing what you know and also what you don't, and then compelling that into action to do something about the don't. And there's a strategy, this is kind of an instructional strategy, but I think the user can use it as well. But it's called muddiest point. What is what aspect of this test I'm preparing for do I understand the least well? And starting there, or targeting that as a place for growth.
Well, another place for growth, I'm teaching a leadership and effective communication critical thinking course, which has all juniors and seniors in it. But one of the books we read is The 5 Elements of Effective Thinking. And one of the best lines in the entire book is, if you can't pass a previous exam, answer the questions to a previous exam that you had, then you're not taking your education seriously. Because it's not one and done, everything's a building block. And then, someone says, oh, I got a B- or I got a C-, and then they put it away, it's like, okay, I passed that hurdle, now just wait to the next one. No, if you don't understand how to do a derivative, you just can't say, well, he's never going to ask me that again, or it doesn't build upon something else. I mean, you see it over and over again. So if you don't understand something, you don't say, well, I missed it, I'm done. No, you need to force yourself to improve on why you missed it.
I think it's a habit that most students here don't have. It's when they get something back, right? Do a self-assessment on it. What did I get right? Do I still know it? What did I get wrong? What was the reason why? And what can I do next time? When they get a paper back, read the paper. Because if it's been a couple of weeks, you're going to read it with very different eyes, and you will, there are things that you will notice that you didn't notice. And maybe you read it if you handed it in too. That's also
What I hear you saying is, I shouldn't rush to return the papers.
Exactly. Yes, I've often used this as an excuse for my own laziness.
When I give a test back in beginning level classes, I allow them the opportunity to correct the exam for points. And it is like so insignificant in their grade that it gives them a big psychological boost to
many do
get
that?
more points.
Do most of them do that?
Oh, they do it. Yeah, they do it consistently, but they have to also have a reflection. They have to have a reflection on what can I do to, and if they make below a 70, they have to come see me or do it with the tutor.
Let's see, at the end of the logic test this time around, I asked them, which of the study skills that we put into the syllabus did you find most effective in preparing for this examination?
Good idea.
I have just a quick thing. I've been going through, talking to students who've got below 70s, and they have to come in and talk to me after the first 2 tests. After that, if they want to, they can. And so one of the key things I discovered over the years is that what they learned in high school was I think the goal is to read something once and get it all in that reading, if they even read it at all. And what happens is, I believe, is that they pretend to themselves that they read it and understand it. And then they lose track of how to identify when they don't know something. And so one of the things I work with some students with is just, how do you know when you don't know something? And so what many of them identify with is the following. You're reading something and you just get this vague feel of discomfort, something just doesn't feel right. And then I said, have you ever thought of interpreting that as, I don't understand this? And so from now on, when you're reading and you get a little uncomfortable, how about just saying, I must not understand this? And so then go back and read through and try to formulate a question, And then once you formulate it in your mind, write it out. And so if you write it out, try to answer it. And then come by and then we'll talk about it and see what you got and everything. But that way, and I think some of them go on from there, but I think some of them, it'll take another class or 2 before they really put this to work in some way or another. But I think that's a good way to identify for some people that have gotten used to it, when they don't understand something. A sense of discomfort and so on. You begin using them. And then the other side is questions. I really believe in questions. And I like the guy talked about questions. And it was questions that got me through graduate school. Once I discovered the technique of going through, realizing when I didn't know something, and then beginning to formulate questions about it. After that, I never ran across a question on a test that I had not already asked myself and answered in the notebook, you know? And so I just got the test, and it was just a matter of, putting down the answer I already worked out and so on. But I think that questions then are the way they're going to become lifelong learners, right? Because they're going to learn they don't know something, you're going to sit down, and what if I know, what don't I know? What is it about this thing that's flummoxing? And then kind of jot it out questions, series of questions, and get through them, and then they know it, Anyway, I'm a big believer in questions. I like the fact
I tell them to pretend they're a Russian interrogator when you're reading something, not an active fiction or something like that, but that they have to extract all the information from this. So you're reading something and a term comes up. What do you mean by that? What are you trying to say? What does that have to do with what you're talking about? And it puts them on a very active role in the learning. So you've got to choke all the information out of there because it's important to you, because you're next on the line if this guy doesn't call up the information.
Fear factor.
Put the fear of God into the material, not into the student.
Fear of Stalin.
Just a
Stalin is
couple
what
of,
they do when you call on it, right? Sorry.
that's about all I had. I had some other basic questions that just kind of reviewing the video content, but really talking about orienting tasks. What are ways that you find you can engage with not only when I'm reading, but when I'm listening to a lecture, when I'm watching a video for information. So I thought I would delineate between the different ways we're accessing knowledge as well.
So one of the things that I've put onto the syllabus is links to things like the Cornell system of taking notes. I have no idea, however, whether anybody takes any advantage of these, except like those interrogations after the test. And the issue of enforcement is another issue because, of course, since I'm teaching a particular subject, I'm not teaching study skills as such. So the issue of comprehensive survey of what in fact that you practiced on is outside the scope of my competency.
Rather than putting it in your syllabus, you could put a link in Blackboard, say Cornell system of taking notes, and then track the use.
Actually, I put that also in the syllabus next to the days where I think it would be appropriate. Well, thank you for that.
Next week. Yeah, so how do we feel overall about the videos? So I recommended at least 1, 2, 4. Do we think we should do all, 1 through 5?
I think we should do 5 because it's right after 4-week grades.
Okay. I'm good
And
with that.
apparently the other one.
The extra, deleted scenes.
Yeah,
The outtakes.
Yeah, I want to see the outtakes with Dr. Chip.
There's also a link which I found for the text, if you, like, for those of us who like words and not watching videos.
Oh, you can turn on the subtitles. You can turn on the subtitles.
But some of us like to have words on paper and not just watch them on
The
the screen.
PDF on the link is very helpful.
The transcript?
No, it's,
It's an outline. It's an outline.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty close to a transcript.
there's no
Yeah.
video
It's
for
a-
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, it doesn't mark it. I had a hard time finding it too, because it doesn't mark it out as well as he does. But here it is.
Yeah.
See video 4.
But for the students, we require just watching the video as the text.
But I did find using the the outline while watching the videos was helpful because he definitely is repetitive at the beginning of each video. And so it helps me just kind of like, all right, well, I know he's going to say that again, so I can tune out the first 30 seconds. I don't know.
Well, 15 seconds if you're watching it.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't watch it chipmunk speed, so.
But there's one thing which I found seemed not to have been mentioned in some of the memory research, and that was the issue of, say, trying to come up with images. That would have been one of the key elements in the memory palace technique, where you should get hold of some fitting but unusual likenesses, since we marvel more at unusual and at the unusual, and therefore the mind is more intensely preoccupied with them. I always found that, and there's, you have to be careful in class, that vivid, funny, or obscene images are the best for this purpose. They often help some attention. The issue of order is one thing. How do we arrange an order? How does the student create an order for being able to associate the images with each other? What about the issue with Eddie came up earlier with about, well, if I don't care about it, if I'm not exercising any solicitude about the matter, will anything register? If I don't pay attention, all I'm going to happen is like finding the ease. I think you mentioned about that. You're reading to find the ease in the book. The one thing which I think they have mentioned is the issue of review, orderly review. But if we don't have the infrastructure in place, then there's no information at the basic level for cooking the stuff.
So, like in the Matteo Ricci's Memory Palace, they give you, in terms of vivid image, they say like, you should picture like one guy like, you know, karate kicking another guy, because that's a vivid image, and it also kind of looks like the Chinese character for war, and that's how Matteo Ricci learns the character for war. And so he puts that in like the part of the palace, you know, where he thinks about like fighting, and then along the sides of the walls in that room are other objects that remind him of the words.
Weaponry and things like that.
And so you have like hierarchy, and you have visualization, and you have review because you walk through the whole palace and you feel like you pick up each object.
And in fact, in modern language techniques, isn't there something like that also when we have thematic elements in the vocabulary, like things in a kitchen, things in a butcher shop, and so on.
It's called context.
Context.
Yeah, but I've often found like a visual dictionary that's, you know, things in a port, or things in it's better arranged that way than alphabetically, for example.
Jan, did you want to say something?
I thank you all for the part now where we're talking about, I'm linking that to the parts of the video that talked about the concept map, where the student himself or herself creates those connections. So it's something that someone said reminded me of a part of the video that I was so glad to hear. Alerting students to the fact that you're not just learning this for my course, you're learning this because this course actually is a prerequisite for something that you're going to need to hold on to later. Because we will be expecting that you'll be able to build on this. And I thought that was a really great seed to plant in our freshmen minds, that it's not, we've talked about one and done on the reading, we've talked about one and done on an exam, but now we're saying it's not one and done on a course. And I don't know whether the rest of you are dealing with that with comps, but I know for our business seniors, sometimes they will deny having passed one of your classes. I don't remember that at all. Well, then we're going to take your grade back. Right, so, but just to get that out there for them as freshmen, that they're doing this not for the transcript, but for the learning that they'll build on. I like that.
I think that the failure to distinguish between memory and recollection is one of the big problems that students have. Animals can remember. I mean, you wouldn't be able to get a worm crawling in any given direction unless it had at least some sort of sense memory about where it's going. That sort of retentiveness, however, fades. The problem is not remembering. The problem is being able to reacquire what's the key information when one wants or needs it. The function is recollective rather than simply hanging on to something.
I think that wraps us up. Thank you.
We got your next.
So next week we are questioning and posing problems, what we're calling curiosity. And we're linking that to the catalog as a core text. So read your catalog.
It might also be helpful to look at that article in the Catholic Encyclopedia on the Actually, these are 2 pages.